I find it fascinating, and I love that you kind of started on the shop floor.
Our job was to find those insights which made P&G either improve their sales or find opportunities where we were losing sales. If you know how a supply chain works or a sales organization works, you are going to talk at the same wavelength with the business leader.
What do you think is common mistakes that organizations get wrong when it comes to putting in AI, or misconceptions that they have?
I always say that we need to temper the expectation of business on what AI can deliver and AI cannot deliver. That's where the next frontier is how can you make a machine which may look and talk and walk like us, but think like us.
Does that make you fearful, though?
Experiences don't come by sitting and watching on the sideline.
Welcome to the Tech Legacies podcast, where every episode we come to you sharing the untold stories of tech executives, including their origins, their career journeys, business insights, as well as tech trends. And speaking of tech trends, what are some of the latest AI and technology trends when it comes to supply chain and manufacturing? As well, how do you build a business case to justify those tech investments? We're going to dive into all those topics and more with our guest today, Ashish Barve. He's been a tech executive across a variety of Fortune 500 companies, including McKesson, Ecolab, Honeywell, as well as Procter & Gamble. So please join me in welcoming Ashish to the show. Hi, Ashish. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Fanny.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If you could kind of share a quick overview of your career with our audience.
Yeah. So my journey started from India. I'm originally from India. I graduated out of engineering school, and my journey started on the shop floor on an automobile manufacturing company. Spent a couple of years there, and then obviously moved on to the IT world or the technology world, where I started implementing SAP for Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble took me from India to Europe, from Europe to America.
Wow.
And in the U.S., I've lived in 3 cities by now.
Yeah.
Started off in Cincinnati, moved to Minneapolis, and now I'm in Dallas.
I love it. I love it. And then give us a little bit of your roles across, Honeywell and Ecolab and McKesson.
Absolutely. So my longest period was Procter & Gamble. I left Procter in 2016, and I joined Honeywell at that point of time. Honeywell was in a process of setting up a analytics organization, a global analytics organization. And the idea was to create a central analytics team that can support different businesses as Honeywell. I did that for almost 2.5 years, and then got recruited for setting up a similar analytics organization and digitization organization for Ecolab, which both happened to be in Minneapolis. And I spent 5 years with Ecolab, set a brand new analytics organization for supply chain specific, both in Minneapolis and overseas, because Ecolab was in the process of setting up offshore organizations. So I got that experience of setting, you can call, nowadays they call global capability centers, GCCs.
Yeah.
But that's what I got an exposure there. From there, I got recruited into McKesson, which brought me to Dallas.
Yeah.
And I've been, I've worked with McKesson and set up their digital organization supporting their supply chain, which is by far the biggest, I call supply chain that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they are $300+ billion revenue company, and 90% of that revenue really comes from distributing biopharma products.
Right. I find it fascinating, and I love that you kind of started on the shop floor, right? On the business side, right? Because I know one of the things we talked about when we were kind of prepping for the show is you say you're bilingual, right? Kind of that combination of coming from the business, understanding the business, plus the technology side, right? Why is that so important in today's kind of economy, right? That combination of business plus the tech.
Yeah, I think understanding business and understanding tech, and more importantly, understanding business is critical because most IT organizations are in the business of supporting the core businesses.
Absolutely.
Which is either you're driving top line sales or you're optimizing bottom line. If you're a manufacturing company or a distribution company, even in financials, you're really looking at driving top line sales, right? Or you're trying to optimize your workforce. So understanding business and business areas is so critical, because then you can have that I call discussions and conversations with your business leaders as to how tech is going to help them either improve their top line, optimize their bottom line, and or like a CFO would say, how can you help me improve my capital efficiency? Because in the end, the capital they deploy or they employ, they want to get returns out of that, right? So tech is I call a value driver that can help
Right.
I would say, approach all of these three areas in a better way.
100%. I would think that, like, especially with big companies that you've worked for, the IT department almost ends up being like a mini consulting firm for all the businesses, right? And all the different departments, right?
No, totally. And I think, and that's by design, I would say, because if IT organizations, I always say, just like I'm a bilingual, I call IT organizations have changed to being a support organization to a bimodal organizations. A bimodal organization is the ones that drive value for your businesses and also support your systems and your infrastructure behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And most organizations expect IT organizations to help drive that. And with the advent of AI, which I'm sure we will talk on later, I think it's even becoming more important that IT organizations play that bimodal role.
100%. And, when you mentioned multiple different departments, right? Finance, sales, supply chain, like all these different departments that IT supports. Do you see any kind of common challenges that, across functions that always pop up over and over?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge I've seen most business leaders have is how can IT help them or technology help them drive their area? And which is why I go back to my previous comment about knowing the business and being that bilingual, because if you know how a supply chain works or a sales organization works, you are going to talk at the same wavelength with the business leaders and help them understand how technology, now name any technology, all the way from ERPs to automation to now AI, how is it going to help them improve their processes, their outputs, and how they're going to actually make them money for a sales organization or help them optimize for supply chain organizations.
Can you maybe give an example of like some common supply chain problems that technology has helped to solve?
Yeah, I think most common problems in a supply chain world, and these came to light in the COVID days, if you recollect.
Yeah.
The demand went through the roof and the supply wasn't there. So the first problem that always every supply chain ever tackles is the whole demand forecasting. Is they don't know what the consumers and the customers are going to ask for. So knowing a good, accurate demand forecast is so critical for a supply chain organization, so they can actually go and make or buy those products so they can service their customers. That's one area that technology has always been helping in driving or working to drive better demand forecast. The other area, obviously, is automation, I call, is whether it is a shop floor in a manufacturing organization or a shop floor in distribution or in a distribution center. Most supply chain leaders are always looking for how can they make their workforce more productive. Because personally, I feel like you get the best fruits for your benefits is when you make somebody else's life much easier.
Yes.
Because if I'm a shop floor worker and I'm doing that job day in and day out, and if I was going to do that job in 8 hours, how can I do that in 7.5 hours or 7 hours? So I can actually use the other time to do some more value-added work.
100%. And then you mentioned building analytics teams too, right? I would think, especially with AI coming in, like I always hear dashboards and, having all the information available so leaders can make better decisions. Talk a bit about that.
Absolutely.
Challenges there.
So if you recollect back in 2012, 2013, most companies were focused on, there was a concept called data-driven decision making, but most businesses didn't really know what that meant. And with the advent of dashboards and insights, what it meant was really giving those insights to the business. So for case in point, when I was the leader for analytics for Procter & Gamble's business at Target, our daily or weekly stand-up was every Sunday we used to get the data, the sales data from our customer, which was Target back then. And we used to analyze that data as to what was selling, what sold last week. And most of the times our senior sales leaders had only 3 questions. What was my total sale? What was the total sales in the category? What was my P&G sales versus my competitor's sales? And if there were any promotions or any kind of activities that were being done by us as P&G and or by competitors, who was winning, who was losing, and if P&G was losing, why were we losing? In other sense, why were the competition was winning? And P&G got that data-driven decision-making very early on. And this is where I feel like the advent of setting up these analytical organizations, not just for building dashboards, but actually they were moving up the ladder. They were providing insights to your partners or your business partners. For example, like me and my small team back in Target team, I call back in P&G's Target team days, we were not just building dashboards or running dashboards. Our job was to find those insights which made P&G either improve their sales or find opportunities where we were losing sales. And I always say in a retail business, when you or I or anybody else from our families walk into the retail stores, and if they don't find the brand of their choice, they are going to pick something else. And that's a lost customer. And potentially that could be a lost customer, it could be for a while, because then that's when the brand switching happens.
Yeah. Nobody wants to see an empty shelf when they walk into a store.
And that's why I said it all got exposed during our COVID days when people were stacking, whether it was toilet paper, whether it was tissue papers, name it, right? There were cereals going off the shelf. There were sanitizers going off the shelf, and
Lysol wipes.
Lysol wipes, exactly. But this is why I say that the whole analytics organization has come through a full journey, where initially they were dashboard builders, then they became insights producers, I call, and now it's not just building dashboards and producing insights. It's actually being on the table with the business and helping them drive the next opportunity.
I love that. Well, and you fast forward to today, right? We have obviously AI. And what are some of the innovations that you're seeing around AI and technology for supply chain in today's kind of context?
Yeah. So there are multiple areas where AI is really helping us help improve our supply chains. One, obviously, as I mentioned, is demand forecasting has been an age-old problem that AI continues to improve their algorithms.
What would be one improvement of that? I'm curious.
So I think taking a forecast accuracy from, most companies that I've seen run around 60-65% accuracy level.
Oh, that's it.
Even taking that to like 70-75%, 5 or 8% point improvement is a whole huge improvement in your inventory, because then it's all about having the right product at the right place at the right time. So when Fanny walks in her store of her choice, whether it's Target or Walmart, and if you're looking for, I'm just making a cereal of a choice, either it is a General Mills cereal or it could be a Nestle cereal, you just want to make sure that you have what you want in the store that you walk in and at the time that you walk in. And those are the critical milestones that happen in a demand forecasting, where we exactly know when Fanny's household is running out of cereal, and we are expecting Fanny to come to a store to buy those. And that granular level of data is what helps improve your forecast accuracy. Beyond that, in area of I call, as I said, supply chain shop floors, whether it is manufacturing shop floor or a distribution shop floor, as I mentioned earlier, driving productivity for shop floor worker is so important because they have the most difficult jobs to do. Not from a process perspective. I call them as they do a monotonous job.
Yeah.
But monotony can bring in so much of boredom and can make mistakes.
Yeah.
So there are I call AR, so artificial reality, virtual reality, AR, VR. Google Glass is a classic example of how Google Glass has been helping our distribution workers to actually pick the product correctly. What if I'm just going back to my example? If you ordered a General Mills cereal and by mistake a worker, a distribution worker, picked a wrong product for you and sent it to your home, you're going to be a pissed customer. So improving the picking accuracies, and that's another area that has been that these technologies are helping. And finally, it's all about, I call them as it all comes down to the circle, which is how do you really automate some simple tasks that a human being is doing, and that's where robotics comes in play, where robotics is actually picking product. I've seen some restaurants over here, leave aside San Francisco and Austin, but even in Dallas area, where you place an order and robot comes and delivers your order.
Yes.
And in next, in an area or in an age where workers are getting more and more, or people are getting more and more educated, it's going to be very hard to find people who are going to do these monotonous activities. So that's something I would expect robotics and robots are going to play a big role.
Got it. So, with it all increasing efficiency, increasing accuracy, robotics and automation, obviously there's also challenges or like problems that can arise, right? Like what do you think is common mistakes that organizations get wrong when it comes to putting in AI, or misconceptions that they have?
Yeah, I think I always say that we need to temper the expectation of business on what AI can deliver and AI cannot deliver. I have seen business audiences which are so hyped up that they think that AI can pretty much do everything. I've talked to a few supply chain officers where they think I can sit here on the top floor and literally watch my factories work on a big Google Glass or big TV. Now that's the extreme end of what they think.
Are we there yet, though?
We are not there yet, but we will be at some point in time. We will be. But
what do you think? How many years?
I would say at least a few more years, like at least 5 or 7 years, where you can see supply chain leaders sitting in their chairs and they can literally watch either robots pick the things, robots doing more and more activities which humans are doing today. You will see that world in the next 5 to 7 years. But then on the other end is you find some leaders who are very skeptical about what AI can do. And that's where so the first step as a technology leader is to really gauge the temperature of the leader and that leadership organization as to what spectrum they are on, and then try and temper those expectations. Because in the end, setting wrong expectations puts me or my organization or technology organizations in a wrong spot. And that's where the disconnect happens is we typically end up either hearing some comments like, hey, I thought AI was going to deliver what I said, right, like a dream that what I mentioned to you, or that expectation is like, yeah, but AI didn't deliver me these things. Because AI is still learning to really, and as I say, is the next frontier for AI is to replicate what a human does. I mean, most standard activities which I mentioned to you, whether it was delivering your order in a restaurant or picking up a product from a shop or from a distribution floor, those are very repetitive tasks that a robot is able to do now. But there will be a stage where a robot can think like a human, and that's when I say that the reality will kick in. And recent announcement of Tesla robots, I'm not sure if you've heard about that, but Tesla is banking on that future where I would say 70-80% of the activities that human does today can be done by a robot.
Does that make you fearful, though? Like, I hear that, and it's part excitement, part like, where's our role, right? As humans in that
I think
optimal
absolutely,
efficiency.
absolutely. But I think humanity has gone through these changes before. I mean, look at it. I mean, you had horses pulling the carts, and then you got your first motor vehicle or whatever, your car. Or, I mean, first 4-car ran. I mean, in 80s, right? So 1800s. So I am pretty sure that industrial and again, fast forward, obviously 1960s 50s onwards, you're seeing a lot more industrialization. I mean, things that were being manufactured with hand, you got machines to do it. Now this I call is the next stage of evolution, where a machine is not just a physical machine, but it's a robot, which
It's
basically
thinking.
it's thinking, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what that's where the next frontier is how can you make a machine which may look and talk and walk like us, but think like us. And yes, I agree with you, is for humanity it's going to be a big change, but humanity has adjusted. I mean, things, I mean, people have taken different courses to study. People have found different roles to play in this new society, and people have found different jobs, right? Change is something that is going to be constant. And I think as a humanity, we need to prepare not just us, but our future generation. How are they going to adapt to this new technology? I mean, I'm looking at Gen AI. I mean, kids are using Gen AI at school now. Obviously, everybody is going to write their essays or write their in a now look at it as like they were essay writers when I went to college, and those roles are slowly going to potentially going to diminish because that value that they offered to correct or to adjust your essays and provide that feedback, a Gen AI or an AI application can immediately provide you.
Well, speaking of talent and people, right? What do you think might be some new roles in, let's talk about supply chain, right? In supply chain and manufacturing, what might be some new roles for humans in this kind of AI world?
Yeah. So I think the first misconception that I want people to understand is AI is not going to replace humanity. I mean, it's a common myth that people have, and it's very, and I understand the concerns people have, because not every task that human does can be replicated with an AI machine, whether it is a robot. So what I just want to get this off of the floor, because in the end, I think companies that are enabling their people to leverage tools like AI are going to be winning in future versus companies that are not leveraging AI or not allowing their people to leverage AI. So it is not a man versus a machine talent, I mean, or a competition, but it is more about how do you enable your talent to leverage AI. Just like I said, in today's world, our students, I mean, I've got a sophomore in high school, right? I mean, so she is actually leveraging, I mean, I'm teaching her to leverage whatever, with a chat GPT, whether it is Gemini, I mean, there are different Gen AI tools, but how can you leverage those to make your essays better? And that's the common way of, and that's the classic example of equipping your high schoolers or your college going kids to use these tools, rather than saying tomorrow I'm not going to write anything and Gen AI is going to write stuff for us.
So in a supply chain setting, What do you think some of those new roles might be for humans?
I think the bigger roles I would say that are going to pop up is people who will understand, I call both the physical world and the digital world. Those are the new roles that are going to pop up, and whether they are people who understand machines, and I use the word machines very broadly over here, but machines and robots on the shop floor, and direct them. Because in the end, it's not about, as I said, it's like the robot can do 70-80% of the work, but you still need to do the 30% of the work. So the people, how we can train our talent to leverage these AI tools on the machine floor. Take the planning organization I mentioned to you and demand forecasting, right? Demand forecasting can we can improve with AI by say 8 percentage points or 10 percentage points. There's still an element of I call a human intelligence that is needed that I don't think can be replaced by AI, which is where the planning organization, we can train them on how to use these new tools, new AI tools to leverage these forecasts. Now, sometimes it can happen that the new tools may be wrong, and that's where a human comes in place, where they can correct those things. So those are the few areas I'm seeing where we can train our next generation supply chain organizations to I call adopt the Gen AI tools or the AI tools in general, then compete with them and or totally rely on them, because I'm not sure we are there yet. As I said, it's like it's going to take some years before we perfect that AI capability.
For sure. Well, let's get a little tactical, right? Because I think a big part of a tech executive role is having to build business cases, right? Because these are not cheap projects, right? They're $1 million kind of projects, whether it's SAP or AI or automation, robots, like all those projects need a business case to be prepared. It has to go through the board. It has to go through the CFO approval, all that, right? In building the business cases for a lot of your projects, Ashish, what are some of the common factors that needs to go into a business case to justify a tech investment?
Yeah. The way I see when I write business case, I expect there are three main things in a business case. One is obviously, what is the objective of the business case? Is the objective to improve forecast accuracy? Whether the objective is to improve the floor efficiency? So the objective has to be very clear as to what are we as a company going after. Two, how is that objective really fitting into our overall strategy? Because in the end, that's what matters the most, right? Because companies are driven by their mission and vision statements, but the mission and vision statements are supported by the strategies they follow. So that's the second piece I got. And the third thing is the value piece. Is if an investment, it's like any other investment you do, whether at my home, right? If I'm going to invest in beautifying or making my kitchen better, I need to get some value out of it. So the value piece is so important. So the three things that I always look at is the objective, the strategy, and the value. And as long as we are true to ourselves and we put the best efforts in defining correctly these three things in a business case, I feel that I feel very confident that it can pass through a senior executive leadership review and or even a board review.
Yeah. And I think it's so important what you just said, because for anybody that's not experienced around that, they might go to the tech side and they see, oh, a shiny new toy, a shiny new tool, and they're chasing that, versus what you said, you have to go back to the business and the objectives and what's going to help the business grow.
No, absolutely. And this is why I said most technology organizations in companies, obviously not the pure tech organizations are developing tech, but I call ourselves as we are deploying tech for the business benefit. So if you're going to deploy tech for business benefit, I feel like the business has a bigger say, and we are there to help them grow. As I go back, is whether we're talking to sales and we're helping them grow their sales, or we're talking to supply chain and we're optimizing their supply chain spend or with supply chain productivity, improving the throughput, whatever their goals are. So it's very critical that those goals, the work we do, are aligned with the goals they have and the strategy. Strategy both the business and the technology has.
So you've obviously worked with a lot of huge enterprise kind of organizations, right? But there are also in our audience kind of mid-sized companies. Um, any kind of different advice you might give to a mid-sized company or a manufacturer or somebody along that supply chain where they don't have as big of a budget or they have fewer resources to put in a big ERP system or any an AI projects? What kind of different advice would you give to mid-sized firms?
I think when it comes to mid-size, it always becomes, there is a lesser cash to deploy compared to the bigger size companies, right? So this process of, I call making sure holding yourself true to your objective, strategy, and value, because even more critical for them. Because in the end, any spend dollar, if it doesn't return value, I'm pretty sure the CFO of that organization and the senior leaders are going to come back, because everybody in the company is asking for funding just like our kids, right? So it's imperative that wherever the funds are deployed, CFOs and the finance organizations and senior execs are typically looking at where best we can get the return. So my suggestion or my advice to all the mid-sized companies is you should have a thorough lens of looking at your business cases through these three factors I call, right? What's the objective, what's your strategy, and then finally, what's the value? Because if those three things falter, we typically end up spending money on technologies that don't yield any benefits. And ultimately, technology departments is the one at the receiving end.
I want to pause real quick here and give a special shout out to one of our sponsors, CG Infinity. I've worked with them for several years now, and I can truly say that they have one of the best workplace cultures that I've ever experienced. And they specialize in a variety of industries, especially energy, utilities, and financial services. And they serve them through their Salesforce, cloud, as well as customer experience services. So thank you, CG Infinity, and I hope you'll support them as they have supported us here at the podcast. Yeah. Otherwise, technology is just viewed as a cost center instead of a value add, right? Well, I work with a lot of IT consulting firms and vendors, right? And they're always obviously trying to pitch services, consulting services, or products to Fortune 500 companies, right? So when you go about looking for consulting partners or vendors, are there certain criteria you always look for before you choose a vendor? Or what are some specific things that they should be working on if they're pitching?
I think when it comes to pitching to a Fortune 500 set of companies, in my opinion,
especially to a CIO, a tech executive.
Absolutely. The key thing is it's what's the value proposition that they're offering? Because if I'm going to implement a new ERP system, I can tell you there is a range of companies that can offer that service I call, right? So you can take the top 5 or top 4 they used to call consulting companies to the smallest one. Everybody has that capability today, right? So what is the difference or what is the value add that your company is bringing to the table when you're pitching for that new ERP implementation project? That's the first one.
What would a value add? What would be an example?
So again, if I would have to say for an ERP takes, I'm just making up, 18 months and $1 million. So I'm giving an example. A better value proposition is, how can I do the same project in 18 months and $800,000? Or it could be that I can do that in 16 months and $1 million. So those are the kind
time and money.
It's all about time and money, because in the end, as I said, we are implementing these capabilities, whether it is ERPs, whether it is automation, whether it is AI, for the benefit of the business. The faster we can get and give these, I call, capabilities in hands of business, the faster we can realize those benefits. Now, I'm not saying that you can do it in 9 months or 8 months. I mean, that's impossible to do. But at least expect some value addition that you bring to the table. Or it's not just time and money too. It's also it's the proven capability. For example, some organizations have never had a failed implementation in on their sleeves or on their resume, I call, right? So how do you make sure that you bring that confidence and you share that confidence with a senior IT leader who feels compelled or who feels, I would say, convinced that, yeah, this is an organization that can help deliver his or her goals.
Do you ever, so obviously skills, capabilities, value add, super important. Do you also look for certain characteristics or personalities or values in your vendors?
Absolutely. I think the key things that we look for beyond skills and value is also their ways of working. Because most of the times when we bring in consultants from outside, not everybody, but I would say some of their leaders get exposed to our business partners or business organizations. So we also have to be careful on who and what we bring to the table, because in the end, it's the IT organization or technology organizations' credibility on the line on bringing folks who can work with, I mean, a spectrum of people, whether it is the C-suite leader all the way down to, I call a picker on a shop floor. So it is so critical to bring these things. I mean, making sure that we get these right people who can work together with our business and with our technology organizations.
If you think back to all the partners that you've kind of worked with over the years, you don't have to name names or companies, but like, can you think of an example where it was just like the perfect partnership and why it was so great for you working with them?
So in my Ecolab days, as I said, I was setting up an organization for supply chain analytics. And obviously, I had an idea and I had my strategy and I had aligned that with my business leadership. But I also wanted a third party's opinion who have done this from ground up, and not just once like I was doing for the first time. They've done it multiple times. So bringing in a third party consultant, not just to convince my leadership, but also convince business leadership that it was the right money spent. And more importantly, when you're setting organizations overseas, it is even more important because you need people who have experience setting these on the ground there, because we're sitting over here in the United States, I call, which is thousands of miles away. I mean, we have a notion of how countries and workforce in those countries operate, but until you land there and until you have that experience, you will never understand how to set organizations. So we have actually, and that was my greatest experience of leveraging a third party organization to not to I would say double check my strategy, but give some and provide some consulting on what are the do's and don'ts when you set these organizations ground up, both here on site and then offshore.
Right. And they can see things that we haven't experienced yet, right? And provide that extra perspective.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears here, Ashish. Like I'm always curious about people's career journeys also, right? So we covered the trends and the business side of it. But if I were to ask you to rewind all the way back to Ashish in high school, right? Or, in your childhood, was there a special moment or something from your childhood that kind of set the direction of the type of leader that you are now? And what would that be?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, this days back almost 30 plus years now. In my childhood days, obviously I grew up in India, as I said, with a lot of my cousins around me. I mean, but I always had a bent of mind on solving problems. I always had, I remember early on in my, there were small mixies where
What is that?
like a small mix, like a mixing equipment that you use at home, and that one day got bad, and I just asked my mom, hey, can I just open that up and see what has gone wrong? So I was always curious and inquisitive of why machines fail and how you can fix, and that bent of mind of I call solving problems took me to an engineering school and then on to into an IT world or technology world. Because in the end, technology world or whether it is an engineering world, it's the same bent of mind that you should have is which is how are like you need to be obsessed with defining what the problem is, as I mentioned, and solving those problems. Now, as you go up higher in the leadership, you can potentially you can have your team solve those problems. But even as a senior leader, I feel you should be inquisitive about problems because I mean, as a senior leader, I feel as a CIO or senior most technology executive, your worth is definitely measured in what value you bring, but also how your organization is portrayed in solving problems, whether they are business problems and mostly business problems. So that's how I took my journey from being, I call a small, fixing small equipments at home. I remember days when my friend, a computer was pretty new, and my friends used to bring and open up the computer towers, and they used to look at what went wrong. I mean, I never bent into that because my bent was more towards mechanical equipments, which is why. But again, it's the same thing. Is those are the same. Is having that inquisitiveness of understanding the problem is so critical when you are growing up, and you challenge your brain because in the end you try and understand how these machines work, whether it is those mechanical equipments, whether it is PCs of 1980s and 90s, whether it is robots of today or AI machines of tomorrow.
Yeah, I so resonate with that because we talked about this. Like we're both came from an engineering background, and yours is mechanical. I love civil, right? I love buildings. It's always like, how did they do that, right? How did they create that machine? But in my case, it's like, how did they build that bridge? How did they do this high rise? We're on the 53rd floor of this building here. Like, how did they get all these things erected and constructed, right? And yeah, I think that insatiable curiosity, I think, drives a lot of technologists, right? Like, how'd they do that? And why did this happen? Right? Yeah. Well, you mentioned all these different kind of careers you had, right? You obviously had a huge progression. A lot of our viewers, we have the whole gamut, right? From college grads watching to mid-level. But I see a huge struggle for kind of mid-level technologists, right? Where they're like manager, director, and they're struggling to get to VP or even the C-suite, right? And it's a whole different set of skills, right? But what do you think it takes to get from that mid-level to more of that senior executive level in technology?
Yeah. So I think, as you said, my journey has been from, I always say I used to program in my early days of my career to leading teams and organizations, right? All throughout my life, I've always followed a principle which is, we used to call back in Procter & Gamble days, the PI principle, which is there are three factors that you always have to look at. One is performance, I stands for image, and E stands for exposure.
Oh,
Uh,
PIE, PIE.
Pi,
Got it.
yeah. Now, what does this mean actually? So, whether you are a mid-level manager or whether you are an early contributor, individual contributor, even at our level, right, at a senior level, performance is something that we own when we drive.
100%.
So it's up to us to drive that performance, whether it is you as an individual contributor, as a team leader. Uh, Image is something that we create. An image is always created by experiences that we provide to our, I call customers, to our partners, to our supporting organizations within a broader technology organization. And that becomes very critical. I mean, that is the key to your brand image is what is your or my image about
In marketing, it's
in marketing,
branding.
it's branding, exactly. And
Yeah.
an exposure is something I call is how do you, I mean, the exposure to the senior leaderships and senior leadership level. The senior leadership level is always looking at people, the next set of leaders I call, which is how do they think? Because it's all about thinking, I mean, strategically, how are we thinking and how are we driving strategies? Because in the end, as you go higher up, ultimately a leader is setting up strategies and driving them through their organizations to achieve those key result areas, goals, KPIs, whatever are there. So these three I call PI principles are so critical in making sure that that and there are no guarantees again, but these are the things that I stand by my principle every time when I look at myself is my performance up to mark? Is my do I have I created a good experience and good image? Because if I create a good image and my organization creates a good image with my customers and with my supporting organization, they're going to come. It's a repeat customers that they're going to come back to me. And then exposure is the way you work with your leaders and or cross like business leaders and how they think about you. Are you the right person to drive this organization to the next level?
I think that's so important what you just said, right? Performance, image, and exposure. Because I think too often people concentrate just on performance, right? I did a good job, so I should get a promotion, right? And then they checked off all their work. They met deadlines, and then they did their work, right? And then I think, especially for technologists, sometimes we struggle with being an introvert, or we don't want to feel like we're showing off because we might seem like we're bragging if we're exposed too much, or like, but I think what you said about image and exposure is so important, because if you're not visible, even if you do the best work, nobody knows it, right?
Yeah. And that's why that image is so important and exposure is so important, because image.
What would be an example of cultivating an image?
So consistently delivering on the goals that you and your team have set up. Now, oftentimes, the goals are not just our goals of the organization or my goals. Some of my goals are supporting somebody else's organization. So it's in a matrixed organization. Typically, you would have organizational goals that support different organizational goals. So if you and your team consistently deliver on those goals, then your supporting organization, because they're your
Makes
customer
other
too.
departments look good.
Absolutely.
Right?
You make your peer and your peer's organization look good. Because in the end, you as a leader also don't want, ultimately we are under the same umbrella of technology organization. You don't want your peer organization to fail because of you and your organization. And they look good because of you. And it's so critical, and that's what creates an image in my opinion. And image turns into a brand, because once you deliver and you consistently deliver on your goals or your commitments, people recognize, oh, this is Ashish and his team. They're always going to deliver no matter what.
You're building trust.
And building the trust. In the end, it's the trust that matters.
Right? Yeah, for sure. When we were researching and talking before this, you kind of talked about this importance of having cross-functional knowledge, right? Don't specialize too early. Can you go deeper into that and expand on that for our audience?
So early on in your career, or anybody's career, I would say, and I tell this to my son who just graduated from college, is you always have to have a broad vision. You always have to gather experiences, because experiences don't come by sitting and watching on the sidelines. Experiences come by actually doing that work, being in their shoes. Whether I am in a shoes of a salesperson or I'm in a shoe of a supply chain person. I'm just making up. I mean, the reason I took that Minneapolis assignment And I know I was moving from a Cincinnati, which was a temperate climate, to a very cold climate in
I was
Minneapolis.
gonna say, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, that wasn't sacrifice, but I will tell you the best assignment of my life was that assignment that gave me a peaks, or I call a bird's eye view on how sales leaders of big organizations think and drive. Because I was a direct report of a sales VP who had a responsibility to drive a $3 billion business for Procter and Gamble with Target. So my, again, coming back, is you want to have a broad experience early on, so that you can then decide these are the areas. Now I'm giving examples of working with business, but also in technology. I mean, yeah, you can implement ERPs, like that's an experience. You can run cybersecurity. You can be part of cybersecurity organization. You can be part of infrastructure organization. I mean, these are so core critical capabilities that you're going to learn, that I would say is so critical as you grow up, because then these skills and these experiences are going to come handy when a person reaches, I call, a C-suite role. Because in the end, a C-suite role is not just an expert of one area. He or she has a broad knowledge base of whatever the area is, whether it is technology, whether it is running an HR or human resources, whether it is running supply chain. Like in supply chain, I always say you can run and be part of manufacturing organizations, you can be part of planning organizations, procurement organizations, quality organizations. Those are the areas for them. But for us, in technology, it's all about infrastructure, cybersecurity, business engagements, project deliveries like ERP deliveries. These are the skills that I will always say broaden them, so you get as much exposure you can. And at some point, you decide to either be a specialist of an area,
Right.
and if you happen to become a C-suite executive, these experiences will come back handy for you.
Yeah, you're almost. I had one CIO on our podcast, and Trudy Van Horn. She was just saying, you almost become an orchestrator, right? Like you move up by learning all these different functions, but then when you're kind of at the executive level, then you got to orchestrate it all and make sure they all fit, and
Exactly.
drive revenue, decrease costs, all that.
Exactly. I mean, I call them as the symphony. In the orchestra, right?
Yeah.
The one who is guiding all the people playing different instruments.
Yeah.
And that's what organizations are, right? You will have organizations playing different instruments and doing different things, as you mentioned.
For sure. For sure. Now, I know you're very passionate about kind of giving back to the next generation of leaders. What are some of the mentoring tips that you've kind of given to others? Like, if think of that person out there on the podcast right now, maybe they're stuck in their tech careers, right? What would be some mentoring advice you would offer to them?
The mentoring advice I always offer to people is understand your situation, because that is so critical to understand what the situation is. Not every situation is similar, I always say, because there are factors that could be internal to me as a person, or that could be factors external to me as a person, and that is organization. But understanding and having a deep understanding of what are your true values, what are your true experiences, and what do you bring to the table versus what is organization is looking for. Some organizations typically look for, and it depends on your level and role, but as I said, delivery. I mean, delivering consistently on your goals is something every organization looks at. So making sure that you're delivering on your goals. There has to be no gap left when you're delivering on the roles, which is where I go back to my pie analogy, where performance comes in play.
Well, that takes like a lot of almost like self-introspection and self-awareness, right? Because what if we don't know our own weaknesses yet, or we're not experienced enough to really know what the organization wants. Any
And this
advice
is,
around that?
yes, this is why you need mentors and sponsors, whether they are, and most probably whether they are in the company, it's even better, because these are the folks who are at a senior level than you are, who know the lay of the land, who know how the organizations work, who know how you fit into that organization or you don't fit into that organization, and they give you the guidance. So building those mentorship and sponsorship. Now, I always say mentors can be, you can ask for a mentor, and I can be a mentor of 5 people or 2 people, whatever that is. But sponsorship is something that is earned. And sponsorships are rare, but not impossible. Because in the end, again, going back, when you have done things consistently for a person or a set of people, that's when you build that relationship that was a mentoring relationship early on, which turns into a sponsorship relationship.
Yeah, for sure. It makes such a difference, right? Because we can't see what we don't know.
Yes.
Especially if we're more junior, right, in our role. You and I have talked about it. We both have, kind of kids that are we have sophomores in high school, as well as you have a son that's graduated. I have a daughter, a freshman in college. And I worry a bit about what role they're going to play, right? With AI being able to kind of encompass a lot of entry-level functions. What happens to our generation of college grads, right? What are your thoughts about that? Like, what do we tell these college grads?
Absolutely. I think the same thing I said earlier is AI is not going to take all jobs. Humans are still going to be there. I tell the same thing to I call now a sophomore in high school is, don't be afraid of AI. Embrace AI and leverage AI tools for your work, but don't lose your creativity, because that creativity and individual skill, that is something that a person brings to the table. And I don't think AI is there yet to replace creativity. Yes, you can instruct an AI application to do what you want to do, but an AI application is not going to instantly create stuff on its own. And that individual creativity, individual skills are so critical now. It could be, simple skills like your math skills are good. Some people are good at, I call speaking. You'll find them in debate clubs and all that. These are core skills. Those core skills you should continue to hone when you're in school and or even going beyond. I remember I had a fear of speaking on stage. Now, as you grow through your experiences in your career, you forcefully you put yourselves in those situations where you are on stage, and now that fear is gone. So coming back, I always say, don't fear new tools. Today, few years ago it was analytics. Now it's AI. These are new tools that are going to come, and it could be something else 5 years down the line. But I always say that humanity is going to be there until you think critically and you keep your individual strengths and take help of these tools to better them.
I so agree with that. And I'm glad you brought up creativity, right? Like creativity, communications, right? Critical thinking. I think those things, even last weekend, I went to a marching band competition for our son, right? And just every 15 minutes, a different high school was doing marching band formations and playing their instruments. And it brought me back to how important like music and creativity and the arts is also, right? Like in our digital world, just keep on scrolling. I think that's definitely something that, and it I don't know, it was very fulfilling watching kids perform again and doing something creative, right? So That's something.
And I'll tell you, in business world too, creativity does help. And actually, that's a differentiator between a person who is, and I'm not saying that creativity is just in art and like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
I'm
Even
solving.
just thinking out of the box.
Exactly.
Right?
Thinking out of the box. Like we are solving a business problem, and thinking differently is something that most leaders value, because in the end, we are there, or the whole team is there collectively to solve a business problem that business is facing at that point in time. And it could be that they are trying to improve their sales, or they are trying to take a look at how to optimize their cost. Again, I go back to those two main examples, but it is so important that that creativity, or that inquisitiveness, as I mentioned early on, is so critical. And that's why I keep telling my daughter is that don't fear these things. Leverage them
Right.
to make better use of how they can help you, and people of her age, right?
For sure.
As they, because in the end, as I said, is like, it's not the task that humans were doing. Yes, definitely robots are going to replace, but we don't have a robot that can critically think yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in 10 years, 5, 7, 10 years down the line, we may have that, and humanity will go beyond that, because it's,
And we may not want it.
and we may not want it. It
Yeah.
could be either ways, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that humanity might think differently. If you recollect, in 1960s, it's what Neil Armstrong and the first humans landed on the moon. Today, it's pretty much nobody. No human is going to the moon, but they are sending robots and rovers to the moon. So look at it as like the task that man did 50 years ago or 40 years ago, machine is doing that, because man is now trying to explore going to Mars.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded of I read a book recently. It was called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it was actually like tips from the restaurant business, right? And it was ideas and tips and advice. It was from one of the best restaurants in the world, or it was voted Michelin 3 stars, like multiple years. And they talked about how you can adopt, let's say, hospitality lessons into other areas. And I ended up doing a presentation of how hospitality best practices can be put into an IT help desk.
Yeah.
Right. So I think like that kind of cross-functional, getting ideas from other industries and then putting it into whether it's supply chain, manufacturing, IT, is that kind of critical thinking that maybe our kids and the next generation can look at. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ashish, we have a tradition on our show where we have these what are called conversation cards. They're from my favorite podcaster, Stephen Bartlett. And so these are questions that were formulated by a variety of like best-selling authors, business leaders. And so I don't always know what the question is. And so just for a bit of spontaneity, if you could pick one and then answer the question. Read it out loud and then answer.
Sure. So the question over here is, what is your definition of success? For me, success is, I call personal success, professional success, and family success. Now, we always talk about professional success. We always talk about, and I will say professional, going from school. Hey, you got A grades, and you went to the best college, and you graduated, and you joined the best companies, and so on and so forth, right? That's part of it. You also were an individual contributor. You became manager, director. You become a VP. You become a C-suite. That's another way of defining your professional success, right? For me, personal success is not just this, but how do I personally grow out of these experiences? Because I call every step you take, just like when we were babies and we started taking steps, every step you take, obviously those are bigger steps now than when we were babies, but every step or every job you go in, every step you take, you basically go there and learn stuff. Now, some of the times you're successful, some of the times you may not be successful. The question becomes is how you define success, as I said, personal success. Even if I failed in my professional success, like if I went into a role expecting a promotion and I did not get a promotion, or I did not like the organization, or whatever that is, you always learn from that period, whatever that was, whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that is. And that's what for me is the personal success, which is what in the end, what did you learn from that engagement or from that? And then for me, the family success, because in the end, humans are not individual people. Organizations are not individual people. It's a team sport. Similarly, in my personal success, it's my family's success. I remember when we relocated from Europe over here, my wife was a practicing physician here in India, and then she had to go through a second round of getting boards, getting qualified, getting certified as a doctor in the U.S. And that was a time when I took a back seat in my career so that my wife could get back into her career, so that she feels successful. If I had taken an approach of just personal success and professional success, I would have left my third family success a void, and that would have hurted me a whole lot in my longer run. Now my wife is a practicing physician in the U.S. Obviously she's been practicing physician back in the U.S. for last 15 years. But she feels more comfortable. She feels more achieved in her area. That is so important. So, I look at success from these three angles. And not every three, at sometimes not everything will be moving at the same pace. Sometimes, as I said, sometimes I will be more professional, successful than my partner. Sometimes it could be my personal success that I was not successful in getting that promotion or whatever, but I learned a whole lot in my personal success. And then in times it could be your partner who could be successful than you are.
It's always shifting.
It's always
and
shifting.
Evolving.
But
right?
Yeah, it's always shifting. It's always evolving. And how you manage these three pillars. Because in the end, life is not about getting to those C-suite titles, getting to those top, I call top jobs, corner offices.
Yeah.
Because you also have families to support and feed. You're also looking at your kids, because it could be that, hey, your kids. We always say is when you put too much effort on one, it's going to show up in the other area. And that goes with, again, it reminds me of pie, right? It's too much of performance is not going to improve your image.
Yeah.
And our exposure, right? So you have to have those three pillars of pie balance. Similarly, you should have the three pillars of success, which is professional success, personal success, and family success.
PPF. You have another acronym.
Yep, PPF.
Yeah. So final question for you, Ashish. This podcast is called Tech Legacies.
Sure.
Right? What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah. So for me, it's as I said, I like to work and drive. So, and then we just talked about success for the business, but more importantly, technology, just like any function, any business, is a people business.
Yeah.
We are. It's not because of me or my leader or that my organization or my organizations are successful. It's because people who are part of your team. And I always feel that building those relationships and maintaining those relationships and at times helping them grow, because this is, that's what I would like to leave my legacy, not just as a leader who is going after business results, but also after people results.
Yeah.
And that is more important for me, is how do I as a person grow and see another leaders and people in your team grow. Because as I always say, nothing, the greatest thing you're going to always see in your own family is your kids grow. And not just grow professionally, but personally, and their families grow too, because in the end, that is what humanity is.
Yeah. It truly is your legacy, like through your family and kids as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ashish. Thank you for sharing with us, with our audience. I always feel like it's such a joy and honor that I get to hear people's human journeys and kind of even the hardships and the trials and tribulations, right? Because there's always a human behind the tech, behind the performance, behind the cost savings or the revenue generation, right? So thank you for sharing that.
Fanny, thank you for having me on this show.
Absolutely. And for all of you out there, thank you for tuning in to Tech Legacies podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as any podcasting platforms that you're listening to right here, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Be sure to leave a feedback or comment so we can continually improve and grow with you. So thank you for tuning in to Tech Legacies podcast. At Tech Legacies, we're all about helping technology professionals grow and succeed in their careers by sharing the advice of top technology executives. If you're looking to take your career to the next level and become a technology executive yourself, we have an exciting program to tell you about. It's called the Tech CXO Excellence Program by Tech CXO Launchpad, and they are our partners. They're offering an immersive, multimodal program developed and taught by current and former CIOs and CTOs who are passionate about building the next generation of C-suite technology executives. And you'll experience a full immersion into the C-suite world and also get to collaborate, network, and experience capstone-style projects with other professionals. And this is all while benefiting from face-to-face interactions in person with industry guest speakers. It is exclusively for a new level of C-suite executives and C-level direct reports and second directs who are earmarked for succession planning and career growth. To join their waitlist, register your interest at www.techcxolaunchpad.com. That's techcxolaunchpad.com. This program has everything you need to take your career to the next level.